Welcome to the STEP podcast from Postal Bible School. STEP is a series of weekends each year when teens and young adults come together from all over Ireland to spend time together unpacking God's Word. This podcast now offers the material presented at the events for further study by the attendees and others. This series features the book of Hebrews and challenges and motivates us to keep going in our faith. Matt Pitts leads 5 sessions to take us through the book before Peter Mitchell draws in a linked lesson from Colossians. The series then concludes with a reflection on the great unfinished task of mission.
It's been, I think as I said last night, a real privilege to be with you guys this weekend and to just see what the Lord is doing in your lives and how He is equipping you for His service. It's been a joy to me. It's been a real encouragement. It's something that I will take back to my role with me, and it's something that has really reminded me of the importance of gathering and of encouraging one another. The way that you have the ability to spur one another on in a group like this is a blessing from the Lord, and don't take for granted what is happening here. It's very, very important. So thank you for having me. One of the themes of Hebrews is the great salvation. We're not to neglect so great a salvation as the one that comes from Christ. And what comes from that is this commission that Christ has given us to go to the world, to see the nations reached with the gospel. And so we're going to have a little think about that in the final session today. It might be a slightly different style to things. It's not based in Hebrews. It's not based in any particular text, but it's hopefully just opening a few thought processes in your mind about how supporting mission across the world is part of all of our Christian lives. The focus really is, how does mission and possibly cross-cultural mission fit into my faith, and how do I get involved? To explain who Echoes International are, and I've been asked the question a few times, I want to just give you a Bible passage, and it's helpful, and it will helpfully also explain the position that most of us are called to be in. Paul is writing to the Philippians in Philippians chapter 1, and he begins his letter with, this is quite gushy for Paul. Like, he's not normally this positive in a lot of his letters, but he writes to the Philippians, he says, "I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus." You know, I'd love for someone to write that of me. Every time they think of me, they're thankful. You know, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? That would be something that we should aspire to. And the second part of what Paul writes about these folks is also that he has confidence that these guys are going to make it, that these guys are the real McCoy Christians, that they are genuinely born-again believers and they are going to stand and persevere. But the question, and this particularly the second part of this passage is very, very famous. You'll find it on all sorts of mugs and Instagram posts to kind of spur people on, and it's a great sentence that the Lord finishes what He starts. But how is it that Paul can say this about this group of believers so definitely? Why can he have the confidence to say that, actually, guys, I think you're going to make it? Why? Because they have shown it. He is thankful for them because of their partnership in the gospel. And what he's saying is a key component of all of our Christian lives is that we partner with others for the sake of the gospel being made known in the world, in the nations. The Philippians saw Paul. You know, Paul had actually planted their church originally. He'd gone on, continued his missionary journeys. The Philippian church had grown, matured, and they'd not lost touch with him. They had realized that Paul's message, Paul's mission, the mission of Christ, was something that they then had to get on board with. And they came alongside and they supported him in prayer, they supported him financially, they supported him with actual personal care. Later in the letter to the Philippians, we find that they've actually taken one of the brothers in their fellowship he may have even been an elder, someone really important to them, and said, look, we think Paul's in trouble, you need to go and find him in Rome. It's a little bit like Drum Gospel Hall saying, we've got this person that we support in Bangladesh, Gareth, you need to go and find him. And imagine, there's no planes, there's no trains, there's no automobiles in this time. That is a commitment from the Philippian church, isn't it? That is partnership in the gospel. And they're not even the church that sent Paul. His commending church, if you want to use that term, was Antioch, not Philippi. Echoes International was set up to be a bit of an extra partner, like the Philippians were. But we're all called to be an extra partner in the gospel. So it's something that actually marks us out as that we are who we say we are. And that's really important to keep in mind. And specifically, at Echoes, we're partners in cross-cultural mission. There's a complexity to doing mission where the gospel has to go from one place and one way of seeing things to another. An added complexity to the one where you're just crossing the street to your friend. And so it requires kind of specific support. And so we're going to be thinking particularly of cross-cultural mission today. What do we think culture is? What is culture? Big question. Music and paintings. So music and paintings would actually reflect where those music and paintings came from, wouldn't it? The attitudes and values maybe of a place, what's valued. What else makes up culture, somebody's culture? Lived experience, yeah, and I heard, a way of life, and the pace of life and the rhythm of life, absolutely. Anything else that makes up culture? Okay, different traditions, and what was it back there? Language, yeah, language would be another one. Anybody got one that's not come up so far? View of the world and the people, yeah, and their kind of history. And so culture is not a simple thing, is it? We've got a list of like 7 or 8 things already that make up culture. It is the nature of God's work in this world that in order for the gospel to go to all nations, to people of every tribe and tongue and nation, as Revelation 7 would say, the gospel has to, at times, go from a group of people of one culture who have the gospel to another group of people who don't yet have it. That's the nature of the world, and so that is what has to happen. And culture can have some eccentricities. Pete, you've worked really hard today. Would you like a cup of tea? It's not got cyanide or anything like that. Just don't worry. Gareth, would you mind? Could you give me a hand? Could you just make Pete a cup of tea? Just topping it up there. Thank you. It's not going to explode. Just genuinely pour the tea.
Does he need the milk in first? Or?
Don't worry about milk. We're out of milk, Pete.
There's
sorry.
A cultural significance to that.
There is a little. But just give him what you can. Excellent. Right. Lovely. That's fine. Now it is a bit cold. You've got to ignore that. I wouldn't drink this. But so the thing is, tea is important, isn't it? Understanding culture. Culture can be explained pretty well by tea. Tea is a big deal in England, where I'm from. It's a big deal here. People do get militant about, does the milk go in first? Does it go in afterwards? All these things. The way in which Gareth has just made that tea for Pete may get by in some places. But if you were in Kazakhstan, that would be deeply offensive, what Gareth just did. And I'll tell you for why. Number one, he rushed it. So in Kazakhstan, when you make tea, you pour it out 3 times. So it goes back in, that was number 1, comes back out again, that's number 2. There we go. And so now the tea is fit to be given. Kazakh culture does not value rushing. If you go from a culture in the UK or Ireland where things are fast-paced, it's transactional, and you go into another country and you don't understand the culture, you can offend people, understandably, because they value people time. You're not grabbing a quick cuppa before you dash off to do something else. Tea takes time. The other thing Gareth did, so Gareth, I'm not getting at you, of course. I saved him from this, by the way. So he poured you a full cup, which was really rude, actually. Now, over here, if you were poured half a cup of tea, people would be like, what's with that? That's stingy. In Kazakhstan, if you are poured a full cup of tea, that means your host wants you to go home. Because what you're saying is, I'm filling it all up to the top. This is what you're getting. Of course, if you pour someone half a cup of tea, you want them to come back for more. And so half a cup of tea says, stay a bit longer. Culture explained by tea. Don't drink it. It's got like 8 tea bags in about that much water, so you won't go to sleep till next week, and it's cold. Crossing cultures is a complex thing, and we need to pray for people who have to do it. But cross-cultural mission is God's mission ultimately. It's His work among the nations, and it is an unfinished task. I'm so glad we chose that hymn to start with, because actually that's become a bit of an anthem, particularly in Echoes. It is an unfinished task. I wonder if you can tell me how unfinished it is. What percentage of the world would you say has little or no access to the gospel right now in this moment? Well, we'll come to countries specifically, but just if you take a broad brush, if there's 100% of the world, what percentage of the world at present do you think doesn't have access to the gospel or doesn't have good access, shall we say? You're 90? Okay, that's quite high, but it could be. We've got 40. Any 42? Okay, I think somebody may have seen my slides. You were. Oh, good point. You were. Yes, you were. But you were listening at Echoes. Excellent. So, 42% of the world at present still has little or no access to the gospel. And that's quite shocking, really, when you think about it. If you think about the things I can do, I can get on a plane and be on the other side of the world in less than a day. I can go on the internet and find out basically, certainly where I am, basically anything I want about, any topic that there's been writing on. How come 42% of the world still don't have access? Well, before we go on to that, let's flip it round and go back 2,000 years to a group of disciples in an upper room in Jerusalem waiting for the Holy Spirit, when there were 120 of them. Now, I'm not saying that 58% of the world are Christians. That's not what I'm saying. 58% of the world has reasonable access to finding out who Jesus is. But 120 Christians after the ascension of Jesus at the day of Pentecost, and now in some backwater, as you described it this morning, which is quite true, backwater of the Roman Empire. That's where the faith was sort of launched, where the church was birthed, and now 58% of the world has access to the gospel. And that is something to give praise for. That is a good thing. But what we're saying is, today we need to still see that there's a lot to go. The Lord has a lot for His people to continue to undertake. And actually, the New Testament would indicate it's an ambition. I don't know whether you know the term bucket list. If you what is it that you want to check off your list before you kick the bucket? If Paul had been asked for his bucket list, it would have looked very different to the average bucket list in the world today. On Paul's bucket list, it seems to have been that he would preach the gospel anywhere he knew that didn't already have it. It's his ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known, so that he would not be building on someone else's foundation. He's saying that I need to get to the place where it's not been heard, and once it's been heard there, I will move on. And there are multiple times, even in the letter to the Corinthians, this theme comes out, even as he's trying to address their church. It's very, very key to how we should view mission. Because mission can very easily, here's this word again, drift. Mission can start as the gospel needs to go somewhere and drift very easily into humanitarian work and social work and all of these things, which are good things. We should care for our communities. We're not condemning that. And quite often these things go alongside the gospel in the way that Christ met people and He healed them at the same time as dealing with sin. But the gospel is paramount, and mission should be driven by the idea of we go where the gospel hasn't been heard yet. So anyway, this 42%, where do we think it is? Well, if you take your booklet, and I'm hoping that some of you have some pens. I did witness somebody colouring this in already, so that'll be interesting. Try and scribble on here, just maybe by shading, the parts of the world that you think don't have good access to the gospel as yet. The areas of the world where you think mission is paramount, and just have a crack at it. This isn't a test, by the way. I'm not going to take them in and mark them in a minute. But just take 2 or 3 minutes with the person next to you. It doesn't need to be perfect, but think about where might the gospel be hard to hear. This would be a really good descriptor of it. So this is a map, and I'll show you a little bit where it's come from in a moment. This is a map of the people groups in the world. The red dots are people groups that don't yet have really good access to the gospel. There was a good question over here as we were talking. What do we mean by access? So access could be multiple things. It could be that actually there is, a Bible-believing church in somebody's area that they could go to if they wanted to find out more. They've got Christians that are growing up openly around them that are trying to engage with their community, that kind of thing. Access could also be, to some extent, the internet, the ability to find things out, but less so, and we might come on to that in a moment. So the parts of the world here that are missional priorities, a lot of them fit into this box. And what you find is if you sail down from Ireland far enough, you actually bump into a line in the sea like a wall. No, I'm joking. Of course, I'm joking. But the 1040 window is a good box to think of, because a lot of those unreached places that we should be thinking of and praying for are in that box. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. So you've got North Africa, you've got the Middle East, you've got India, you've got Southeast Asia. Lots of those unreached areas are in that window. And I think it's helpful to just have some picture in our heads of what this looks like. The reason for that is that a lot of people have maybe a view of mission that was more relevant 100 or so years ago. So if I say the word missionary, just try and think of the first thing you picture, the first person you picture. Somebody just looked at Gareth. That's pretty good. But I guarantee to you that somebody in this room is picturing someone with a pith helmet and a machete hacking through a jungle in Africa. Somebody will be, because that is the kind of cultural picture that we often have in the UK and Ireland of mission work. That is the one that we have grown up with, a sort of David Livingstone view. And sometimes, there are still jungles to be cut through. I was in Argentina last year, and I met a guy, and his mission was still going into Ecuador. So he was Argentinian, and he would go into Ecuador and literally cut through jungles, and he had his canoe, and he would go and find people groups that nobody knew were there, and he would share the gospel. He was nicknamed Rambo, because apparently when he was younger, he was a big fan of the tank top and the bandana and things. So there is still an element of machetes and jungles, but actually, a lot of that mission work of machetes and jungles has been very successful. And actually, if you look at, for example, a lot of areas of Brazil or Southern Africa, some of those countries are now products of the gospel, and you're getting mission workers going from those countries into the rest of the world. Praise the Lord. I think it was just after the turn of the 20th century in Edinburgh, there was a missions conference of people from across the kind of Christian world involved in evangelical mission. At the time, there were, I think, 3% of the people there who had been born in what would be described now as the majority world or the global south. About 3% of the mission force in the world was made up from there. Roughly 100 years later in Cape Town, there was a similar conference. The attendees there, 70% came from the global south and the majority world. The Lord has done a great work through the gospel, building up his church and sending. But there are still these areas we need to consider. Now, I did stick a QR code on there, but I will just show this. I'm hoping it'll work. But if I go across to just a web browser here, the map that I got there is from a site called the Joshua Project. It's really good at identifying how you can be praying for particular people groups. And people groups are an important concept in mission, as important as countries. In the Western world, we come to things with a very country-based view. You know, we like maps, we like lines on maps. A lot of the world doesn't operate in that way. A lot of people don't view the world that way. And we can come a cropper when we do. Before I worked for Echoes, I was a teacher, and I was, of all things, I ended up getting sent to Ethiopia from my primary school because they had a link school in Ethiopia. And they wanted some help with teaching English, particularly certain elements of reading. So I got sent to Ethiopia, and before I went, I did a bit of prep. So anyone know the national language of Ethiopia? This is Amharic. So Amharic is the national language of Ethiopia. So I thought I'd go on Google and went on YouTube and looked up some greetings and, learned how to say hello and thought, these icebreaker things, even if somebody then has to converse with me in English, it'll be nice to value their language. So I learned a bit of Amharic, got on the plane with my colleagues. We get off the plane, we're met by somebody, I crack out my Amharic and they go, oh, that's very good, you know how to say hello. I thought, this is great, this is going well. So then we drive to the school, which is 400 miles to the west of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And I get out of the car and people come up to greet us. I think this is my moment. I'm going to crack out my 7 words of Amharic that I know very well. And I do. And the guy looks at me like I've got 2 heads because he doesn't speak Amharic. He lives in Ethiopia, but Ethiopia has 80 local languages amongst the people groups. And I thought in countries. And so the people that I was actually there to talk to and build that friendship with, they spoke a completely different language that bore no resemblance to Amharic. People groups are really important. Praying for people groups and thinking of people groups is a valuable thing, because actually when we think of the unreached, it can often look like the job is done in a country when in fact it isn't. So anyway, I'd really recommend the Joshua Project as a resource there. So 42% of the world is unreached. This is a bit of a shocking statistic. For every 30 missionaries that go into the reached world, as it were, because mission work can often go to where the church already exists. We find that happens. How many would you say go into the unreached world? Half. I heard 4. Somebody said half. Now that does say that we maybe as God's church have got our priorities a little bit skewed, because the unreached should be our priority, says Paul. So if one of us, out of every 30, is actually going to them, that makes a difference. About 2% of funding goes to unreached ministries. At the moment, giving goes largely to where the church is growing and stronger, which is not a bad thing. It's not bad that the church is growing and stronger. That's good, but we have a balance that we maybe need to redress a little bit here. Again, it's that priority of Paul's to reach those who don't know Christ. I wonder whether you can have a think for a moment about why there might be that kind of off balance aspect to mission. Can somebody put their hand up? Who here has heard a mission report on work in, Tanzania? Yeah, a few hands have gone up. We know about Tanzania, don't we? There's been mission there for a little while, and there are churches, and it's growing. Can you put your hand up for the last mission report you heard on Tajikistan? Well, so that is fantastic, because I use that question a lot, and so far that's the first hand that's gone up. It's not heard about very much. Because we as people, we lock onto stories, don't we? Stories encourage us in our Christian faith. And so where there are stories, they're brought back to us, and we're told them, and they encourage us, and we pray for these things because the stories are coming back of mission. think of missionary biographies. So many, I was chatting to Dan actually a couple of years ago, and he talked about all these missionary biographies he'd read growing up and the impact they'd had on him. The stories are important, but if you're only ever hearing stories of places where mission already is, because there are stories to be told, you will never think of the places where it isn't, because there's no story. And that is why it's important for us to be intentional, to pay attention and say, well, what is it? Where are the parts of the world that I'm not hearing from? Where are the stories that I'm not hearing? And that's a really important kind of way to think things through. And that allows us to be prayerful first and foremost, and to lay these places before the Lord. Prayer is an important thing. I'm always struck by these verses at the end of Colossians, where Paul is saying to the church in Colossae, and pray for us too, that God may open a door for our message, so that we may proclaim the mystery of Christ, for which I am in chains. Pray that I may proclaim it clearly as I should. If there was any missionary that could have gone it alone, it was probably Paul. Now he couldn't, these verses say. Even he needed the Lord to equip him at every stride. So mission is God's work, and that's really important to remember. And so prayer is the DNA of mission support. Before there's anything else, you should be praying for mission. But the question is, what should we pray? And this leads us into the next point about being informed. I don't know has anybody heard of a site called Prayercast? Yeah, so a couple of folks. So Prayercast is a really helpful site, and you can search by all the different kind of countries in the world, and there's a video prayer for each country, and it's someone from that country praying for their country, and it gives you an indication very quickly of what it's like to be there in some small way, and what you can pray for in that place. And it's a great resource that you can use just to encourage your prayer. It's a way of getting started. And if you wanted to, say, gather with a group of friends, play a video to kick it off, and then just start praying for that country. Very, very simple, but a good thing to do. So be informed. With Echoes, we have a variety of ways you can stay informed. We began as a magazine long time ago. That's where the word echo comes from, back when it was cool to call magazines Echoes. But we've developed into all sorts of different areas of social media. We have a podcast called The Same Commission. There is a very famous guy called Dan Kell on the podcast very soon. But it's taking people through missional issues that matter in the world today. Things like, what relevance does business have in mission? What relevance does partnership have in mission? What about a particular part of the world? What about Central Asia? What about the Far East? What about ministering to Muslims? What about migrants? And it's basically myself and one of my colleagues, Jim, and we sit and have conversations with experts in these different areas, and it encourages people to pray and support mission differently. So be informed. If you're not hearing about mission, then maybe this would be a little prompt to tune in, to follow mission agencies on Instagram and pick up on what they're doing, but maybe try and get in a little bit deeper. Connect with some resources to find out a bit more. So be informed. There's the podcast. Just an exciting thing that we're launching next year that would be of help to you. I'm hoping we'll have a new app that is encouraging people to pray for mission. You'll be able to go onto it. You'll see Gareth and Margaret's smiling faces, and Noel and Liza, and the whole gang. And there'll be updates on what our different missionaries are doing, but also updates on parts of the world that you can pray for. It's basically designed to help you to pray on a daily basis for mission as a driver, really. And you'll be able to personalise your feed and follow particular partners in parts of the world that you find interesting and that kind of stuff. And it should hopefully be a really good opportunity for people to connect with mission in an easy way. If you'd like to be a beta tester by the way, could you come find me afterwards? We need people to test the app before it goes live. And think about being involved. There's There's a number of programs you can get involved in. Over in my neck of the woods, there's things like One to Lead. Step here will be a good one. If this is your first Step weekend, stay with it. This is preparation for mission, actually, ultimately, whether that's here or elsewhere. Closed short-term teams are a great way to get into cross-cultural mission and get some experience. The First Serve program, which Echoes runs, again, if you have a year, whether it's a gap year or you want to take a break after university or something like that, and you want to say, well, has the Lord got cross-cultural mission in my future? I'd like to find out more. Come on First Serve. It's an opportunity to do a bit of training. It's to serve in a church in this part of the world, and then serve in a cross-cultural environment. We've had folks from Peru to Lebanon and all over the place, just finding out what it is to serve cross-culturally. And we're also trying to pull together next year a WhatsApp community online, just to encourage like-minded, kind of, I guess, young adults to build one another up in their support of mission. So I'll send, when that comes up, I will send it to Gareth, and I'm hoping he might push that round the Step group. Another one that I know some people here have tried. Go on holiday to the unreached world. There's Oak Hall tours to Uzbekistan. We can suggest those. But actually, just going to a country in the unreached world, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be doing too much. But actually, just being in a place can help you to understand it. Go and see. Some of the places where the faith is restricted are still open for tourism. That is how I visited Central Asia as a tourist. If I rock up and say, oh yes, I'm the missions director of Echoes International, then I will be there for about 5 minutes. But to visit as a tourist, well, they want tourism, they want my money. So why not go to the unreached world and find out more about it? You never know what the Lord might do with that. After that, at the very least, he will encourage you to pray more for that place, and maybe you will be an advocate for that place in your fellowship at home. But, what about making your holiday serve Christ? So partnering in the gospel, being involved, really important. And as you go, don't forget that long-term mission doesn't necessarily look like somebody going to a place and saying, I'm a missionary, I'm here to help anymore. It can do. That can still be a way that people go, sent by their local church in a very open missionary capacity. But a lot of countries in that 42%, you can't be a missionary. You cannot go there and say, I am here to share the gospel, because you won't get in, you won't get a visa. Take Uzbekistan, which we've some of us have been talking about this weekend. They don't need missionaries. Well, they do, but they don't want missionaries. But they do need computer programmers, because they're trying to develop the country. I spoke to a guy, he's actually in one of our partner agencies. I reckon you might know him. But he picked out a country in Asia. He said, what is it that this country doesn't have that I could set up a business to do? And he ended up making barbecues because they didn't have that. Well, I think it was American grills, actually, which, to put it correctly. That got him in, and that got him contacts, because then he employed people, and he used that as a means for the gospel. Again, commended by his local church, sent in the traditional way, but didn't look traditional on the field. So think about what the Lord has put in your hand. What is it that you can use for mission, and use that? That being said, we are not all called to go. Most of us will stay where we are, and we will do mission where we are, and that is fine. That is a model. We cannot have a church that is constantly nomadic. But we have to understand that even if we are called to stay, not go, we are still part of that task of making disciples of all nations and of being Christ's witnesses to the ends of the earth. But our role might be different. There was a famous missionary of years and years ago who decided the Lord had called him to India, and he said to his friends and his church that he went from, I will go into the pit. I will go into the pit if you will hold the rope. And that's very powerful. Some of us are called to go and be lowered into whatever it is that the Lord would have us lowered into, and some of us are called to hang on to the rope. My experience with Echoes, and maybe I'll finish on this one, is that the Lord continues to call people into long-term cross-cultural mission. This last 3 years at Echoes, we have had 33 new people in our long-term mission partner list. That is incredible. It's an increase, and next year it will be the same number again. Possibly more, actually, thinking of our mobilisation list. So the Lord continues to call those people to go. What I would say, and this is maybe a controversial opinion of my own, I think that in my generation, perhaps your generation, because terrifyingly we're not the same generation, I think that there is less of an understanding that we have a responsibility to hold the rope. Controversial opinion, I don't think our churches now have the same sense that they need to be clinging onto that rope that they did 50 years ago. I don't know entirely why that is, but it needs to change. And I am hoping that at the very least, as we have thought about our mission in this world, at the very least, I'm hoping that there will be some encouragement to cling onto that rope for those who have gone, to be partners in the gospel in that way. We know they're in the Lord's hands, but the Lord uses his people to minister to his people. And it's costly. It takes concern. This guy Epaphroditus, like we started off at it's a bit like sending one of the people that is really important to you, and giving them to mission. But it hurts sometimes to support mission. We have to support in prayer, yes, but actually at the end of the day, missionaries can't eat air. There's a financial need for missionaries. There's a pastoral need for missionaries. If your church, wherever you're from, has sent a missionary somewhere, why don't you write to them and tell them that you're praying for them and ask to find out more? Come alongside them and encourage them in what they're doing. You could do that. There's nothing stopping you. That is all part of being concerned. And I would encourage you, just as we finish this session, to just see that we are part of this huge gospel endeavour, this huge gospel partnership that includes the creator of the universe. It is a glorious thing that you are part of, but we are all part of it. Mission is not something that is for a particular kind of echelon of the church. It is something for all of us. We might all have a different part in it, but we are all partners in the gospel, and that is how we will be marked as true believers, as truly those who love Christ, that we would be willing to be part of his gospel enterprise to the nations.
Thank you for listening to our STEP podcast on the book of Hebrews. Please visit postalbibleschool.ie to find out more about our events and resources.